Welcome back to Generals and Napoleon, episode 42, Sir John Moore, hero of the Battle of Corunna. Before we begin, I'd like to remind all our listeners that if they'd like to enjoy bonus content of our podcast, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Generals and Napoleon. As always, we appreciate your support. Now, on with the show. We have a special guest on for, is this our third time or fourth time, Marcus Cribb?
I've lost track myself. Is it my third?
I think it's our fourth time.
Fourth. We did Wellington as well. Fourth one of the Generals. Thank you so much for having me back as well.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, we've covered Wellington, Hill, Crawford, and who are we talking about today?
We are talking about Sir John Moore.
Fascinating character, isn't he?
He's really fascinating and has a few little marmites and bits about him, a few little love and hates, and there's some controversies thrown in as well for good measure.
Yeah, and sadly cut down before his time, but we'll get into that.
We will.
So before we jump in, I do want to talk about a couple things for our listeners. One, first and most important, because it's coming up the earliest, in June 2023, Marcus is giving a free tour of the Waterloo battlefield in Belgium. So if you want to go, check out the details on dukeofwellington.org. The other two things, Marcus, I'll let you talk about briefly.
Thank you. Yes, that one, free tickets, and I think it's about half has gone already. The next two I want to talk about is I'm giving a tour of Portugal and Spain, including sites Relisa, Vimeiro, Battle of Porto, Ciudad Rodrigo, Badajoz, Combat on the Co, and a few others in September. That's also on dukeofwellington.org, and a few other sites. I'm giving that along with my friend Dan Hill, who's a battlefield guide and historian. It's at a reasonable price set, hopefully, for everybody, and over 7 days we're visiting a lot of sites. It's about the history.
Yeah, indeed. And then last but not least, we have the Napoleonic and Revolutionary War Graves charity, correct?
Correct. Thank you. Yeah, I know you're kind enough to be a member, and I'm one of the many trustees, and we've got a team supporting us who volunteer their time. And yes, people from the American Revolution until the end of Waterloo, veterans and serving personnel from all branches of any armed forces. We want to honour their memory by conserving their graves and doing some research into them as well. But it primarily comes across trying to look after their graves and memorial stones, funerary monuments directly about them. And I'm going to be unashamedly, we are fundraising right now. We're making money, but we're now actually doing projects to do restorations. So please do check out the NRWGC. Please join us as a member if you can. And as people might have seen on social media recently, we've now got some very nice ties.
I saw that, the neckties. I need to get one of those.
Please do buy one. Yes, they're really smart.
Okay. Well, let's dive into our protagonist for today. John Moore was born in 1761 November in Glasgow, the son of a doctor and writer. What do we know about his early life?
So this is at least the second Scot that we're covering. He was the eldest son. He did have some older brothers and sisters. Apart from one sister, they died sadly young, which was all too common back then, and had several younger brothers. He grew up in Glasgow and apparently did speak with a thick Glaswegian accent, and travelled quite a lot with his father, who was a doctor. Through his father's work, he ended up getting some very good connections, including the future 8th Duke of Hamilton, which is a very established Scottish family, who his father kind of stepped in. The personal physician had to go back to look after the family, leaving the 8th Duke alone when he was unwell. And so through that, Dr. Moore, Sir John Moore's father, steps in and looks after him. And they end up traveling with him and Sir John Moore actually going off around Europe, what they used to call the Grand Tour.
Yeah,
that's where you visit all the sites of antiquity, especially Italy and France, and start to kind of get a bit of an education hands-on.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. Like, and throughout his youth, he's traveling throughout Europe and just learning about different cultures.
He does. He doesn't just travel. They stay in Geneva for 2 years. They go Paris and then on to Geneva. He's there for 2 years, and some of the parts there, he apparently before that he had terrible handwriting. His father had to like draw lines on paper in school. You still get line notebooks. They didn't have that. So he improved his handwriting and studied Latin and French to such a level that he was actually not only speaking French, but was writing his letters home to his mama, as he wrote to her in fluent French as well. So really improved his education.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think just learning not only the cultures and the languages when you're later on commanding multinational forces, that probably helps out.
It really does. And he has a hell of an adventure, actually. He gets wounded by, so this is the future Duke, who then becomes the 8th Duke of Hamilton. He gets wounded by him in a mock duel. He kind of gets stabbed in the side. They go on to tour German courts, where he's offered not once but twice by German aristocrats to join them as Hussar officers, including by the Princess of Brunswick.
Mm-hmm.
He does Vienna, Rome, Naples, and Pompeii, and then he climbs Mount Vesuvius, and it starts erupting on him, and he has to run away from the lava.
Well, that's a wild upbringing of adolescence there. That's crazy.
Yes, we've already got the makings of quite a good adventure novel.
Yeah, no, already he's lived quite a life. And then to top it all off, he enlists in the army in 1776 in the 51st Foot and sees action as a lieutenant on the other side of the world at the American Revolutionary War.
On the other side of the world. And what I didn't realize until kind of diving down into this recording is when it was actually, he heard that he was going to get his commission when he was in Naples, but he was only 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd recently changed it that he couldn't be under 15. So his father changed his declarations, declaring him as 16, even though he was actually joining the army at 14. So he was an incredibly young boy, really.
Yeah. But like you said, he's commissioned as a lieutenant. And in a foreshadowing event, Moore receives distinction for his efforts in a campaign in what is common day Maine, the state of Maine,
right,
where a small British force holds off a much larger American army until help arrives. Yeah, I wonder what skills he learns while he's in America.
Yeah, most of the time he seems to actually have a very good social life. He's writing letters home, commenting on the mess where they're living there, married officers, single officers, having balls, parties. But then this main expedition is both naval and land forces, and the American forces come in, and I think he commands effectively a company and holds off the initial American advance when they land for a bit of time there, kind of buying time, fighting them back, and then retreating back we don't say retreat, we say withdrawing in the British Army, withdrawing back to his main troops. So there's an element there of quite hands-on and fighting as a young man. Yeah.
Well, after the eventual British withdrawal in 1783, when Britain and America have the peace agreement, he goes back to Britain in 1784 and is elected Parliament. Again, a very young person. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us about the members of the army also serving in Parliament at the time? It seems fairly common in this era.
Yeah, it seems strange, doesn't it? But it is actually quite common. Parliament, this is the House of Commons. So for international audience, we have two houses in our parliament. So we have the House of Commons and the House of Lords.
Right.
At this time, now you see everyone in the House of Commons. When we talk about Parliament, we tend to actually mean the House of Commons as MPs. Actually, then, a lot of the business was done in the House of Lords, the hereditary office. So that kind of meant often the Prime Minister was coming from there and courtesing his cabinet from there and across the House of Commons. That meant that a lot of people could be elected to Parliament and actually only need to be there really quite part-time.
Right.
It also advances their status. If you think you're going somewhere, let's talk about one of the balls. Today it'd be the golf club, for example.
Right.
You go and who's going to be the most important person in the room? Well, it's the politician.
Right.
If you're a politician and an army officer, people are going to want to talk to you. And let's not forget that the army is going to be choosing people at Horse Guards, at its headquarters, to lead expeditions, lead forces, and become those generals in position. It's going to do it quite a lot on favoritism, or actually just seeing somebody's name on a list and you recognise that. So it's quite a wise move, actually, to become a member of Parliament this time.
Yeah. And in some cases, like Wellington, you work away all the way up to prime minister.
Right. I mean, yeah, he does. And Wellington was prime minister for the member of parliament. Sorry, he was a member of parliament in Ireland and then becomes prime minister in Britain for complicated reasons. So yeah, it's quite common, and I've heard of quite junior officers doing it and quite senior as well. But he does it at this time. He kind of takes advice from his old friend, the Duke of Hamilton, and gets elected. Less said about British elections at the time and Rotten boroughs. Please see an episode of Blackadder for that, really. But it was very nepotism and quite corrupt.
Okay.
But yeah, he does that, and he becomes a major briefly in the 60th, the Royal American Regiment.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, he either receives a promotion or purchases a promotion major and is not assigned to the Mediterranean theater and is involved and wounded in the invasion of Corsica, which is Napoleon's home island. Yes. Do we know a lot about that invasion? I know Pasquale Paoli was there as governor.
Yeah, I was going to mention Paoli. Yes, one of kind of Napoleon's mentors, idols. Can we say? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's quite a major figure in young Napoleon's life. But this is where Corsica's coming out of being part of Genoa, their old empire, and so it's the beginning of the Revolutionary Wars. And it's French, and it's got an uprising for the Corsican people, who they no longer see themselves as Genoese or French; they're seeing themselves as Corsicans. And because of where it is in the Mediterranean, and Britain is a major naval power, it's really important for its naval anchorages. From Corsica, we can attack France, we can support places like Malta, we can get across down to Egypt and those trading routes. So it's really important.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, it's pretty much Corsica is halfway to about everywhere in the Mediterranean. So yeah, it's a very important island to control.
It's a really important island. It goes over there in the summer of 1794 with British Army, Corsican forces, and Royal Navy, and they start against the French garrison. And this is really early in the Revolutionary Wars, and they start to take the northern Corsican towns with amphibious landings. It's really difficult terrain. The Corsican countryside is really mountainous, dry, shrubs, kind of tough plants that are covered in spikes, and incredibly mountainous. So they're fighting up through there, and that's actually really difficult going. But the eventual victory was enough for the Corsican people and Paoli to then pledge allegiance to Britain and bring over more reinforcements there. So it becomes an eventual British and Corsican victory against the French, who finally surrender at the kind of the autumn of 1794.
Yeah, and then he's promoted again to colonel, and again is reassigned to the other side of the world, the West Indies this time, under Sir Ralph Abercrombie. And it just seems to me that he's getting a worldly education, both growing up and in the military. And I know we kind of talked about, we're going to talk about this later. Do you think this diversity helps him to become an efficient trainer of soldiers from around the globe?
I think it is giving him a really diverse background. Sir Ralph Abercrombie, who goes on to things like the Egyptian campaign, and the West Indies itself, it's worth noting, was thought of as being a bit of a death sentence. Soldiers would do everything they can really to get out of it. Certain soldiers actually refused to board ships if they thought they were going to the West Indies. They would near mutinies, especially with one of the early Scottish regiments. But he went over there, and he would have seen quite diverse units. Sadly, they had huge casualty rates through disease, things like yellow fever and malaria. And so they were assisted with locally raised troops as well. So there's going to be a real mix there of professional troops, kind of troops that really do not want to be there, and also the locally raised units. And that is going to give him diversity. And when you think of the working already with Corsican irregular troops and the forces that would have gone over into Corsica, and also the background that he's had in the American Revolutionary War of Independence, he's been made aware of the differences that were there. If not working directly alongside, there's famous units like the Rangers, the Loyalist units from that conflict. Right. So he's already, in quite a short career, got that wide, like you said, worldly view.
Yeah. And he helps the British recapture the island of St. Lucia from the French. And Abercrombie must have had a lot of faith in this young man, because he left him in charge of the garrison there.
Yeah, he does. He gets promoted up. and kind of left in charge until he himself gets yellow fever and he has to come back.
Yeah. And then 1798, he makes it big time. He's promoted major general. And again, gets dispatched this time to suppress the Irish Rebellion of 1798. How did he perform there?
Yeah, 1798 is one of the big rebellions in the Irish uprising history. What's quite interesting here is the main kind of thing you find about Sir John Moore in Ireland is he's been told he's not as bad as compared to General Lake. So General Lake's kind of going in and being incredibly heavy-handed. You know, it is murdering. It's kind of summer executions. This is not our finest hour against the people of Ireland. In all the troubles that have gone on, without unpicking that too deeply. But yeah, he's thought of as kind of he arrives early before Lake at certain towns, and they basically surrender to him. Quite thankful it's Moore and not Lake. So that's a backhanded compliment, but at least it's better than something.
Yeah, better than Lake. When did he get the title Sir, though? Is that come up yet, or is that later on?
That comes up later.
Later. Okay. So, yeah, but it's just it rolls off the tongue, Sir John Moore.
Sir John Moore, yes, it is. It's difficult with this era with people changing titles. You know, Wellesley to Wellington, Paget to Uxbridge. There's quite a few. So yeah, obviously he was not born Sir John Moore. He didn't come from his nobility.
Okay, well, let's jump ahead to 1803, where he's given command of a brigade, and I think one of the most critical things that he gets credit for, or some credit for, is he establishes a system of drill and maneuvering. Can you tell us a bit about these doctrines?
Yes. So this is, he's sent to the south coast of England, not far from where I'm sat now. And he's initially helping out with building the Royal Military Canal, which links up like Hythe and the real south coast of England. And I walked it last week. It's fascinating. And there's a lot to see there. I'll give them a really good shout out for all the plaques and statues they've made. Really good Napoleonic history just in the middle of the countryside. I really enjoyed that. Okay. And whilst he's there, some of the troops garrisoned are put under his brigade. And he's got the chance to do some military engineering alongside some military training. And the Shorncliffe Barracks. But also, he's given troops up near Chatham Dockyard, Royal Navy Dockyard. And they take them and they start to kind of do some loose drill. Well, actually, sorry, he's actually done that already in 1790s. He's done some loose drill with them in Chatham. And he takes what he's learned there, which involves a lot of German soldiers. And he starts to use that and his ideas and his drill to write a kind of a pamphlet, a drill manual at Shorncliffe. And this starts to become the basis of British light infantry manoeuvre, which is interesting because you'll see it in basic training today. It breaks down into pairs fire manoeuvre. That's one person firing whilst the other one moves forwards. And that level of breaking it down, I don't know if we've covered this in previous podcasts, but the British regiment system is very much around a battalion, and it really doesn't break down much beyond company level. So these are captains commanding about, in theory, about 100 men. You're now breaking it down to not only the sergeants having a lot of commands and junior officers, but then individuals who hold no rank making very quick decisions and using their initiative to come back to orders and spreading out a lot further from the main part of command. Right.
And I think that uniformity is important, especially if, let's say, you're forming square and you're being charged by French cavalry. You know, you got to have a lot of faith in the guy next to you.
You've got to have a lot of faith, and you've got to know that, say, forming square is a great example. If you're spread out in pairs, fire manoeuvre all through the woods, and you start to hear they use trumpets and whistles more than drums, and you start to hear that whistle blow to rally, you've got to know that actually you're doing things like shouting, going, get back, get back. And if you don't shout because you head down running back, then actually you're going to leave your next friends alone, and they might, effectively get cut down by French cavalry. Right. So it relies upon people next to you. It relies upon a level of initiative that soldiers at the time weren't widely using. It had happened over in America. And then if you follow the line of training, it'd been lost. It'd been lost for quite a long time and hadn't really come back. There was a little bit in the light companies of each regiment, but even that has really been dulled. And there's a lot said about it for what lessons were learned in America and brought over, where not many have been championing it in the intervening years. So it's quite interesting that Moore was in America and would have seen some of that training.
Yeah, and I think the intriguing part is it goes beyond the physical part of training and focuses on the mental and spiritual side of becoming a soldier. And around the same time, Napoleon had that camp of Boulogne where he's training for 2 years, his men, really honing his instrument, kind of like Moore was doing in Britain.
Yes. Yeah, it takes a lot to kind of trust these units. They are going beyond just the drilling and do not get me wrong. I think to stand in a line and receive cavalry and receive cannon fire, and whilst a guy next to you is blown apart by cannonballs, you just step into his gap. That's a whole different type of training and bravery, which, I don't think I'd have.
I can't imagine.
I can identify far more with the light infantry who are running around. But that's very physical, and it involves something cutting edge. Certainly when they started to form the Experimental Corps of Riflemen, which became the 95th Rifles, they were asking for NCOs to come from other units, and they specifically didn't want them to send us your 2 worst corporals. They wanted to have the best that was available. And they were working alongside, like I said earlier, there were German units that the British Armed Forces had as emigres units, so foreign troops that had come across. The Germans had really championed this in the intervening years. We had some really small German units that had some fantastic commanders who had written some other pamphlets, largely in German, which is why we don't remember them as well, and some Hessian troops. And we're not very good with our languages,
right.
But they'd actually kept this kind of lineage of light infantry alive, the famous German Jaegers, the hunters.
Yeah.
And what Moore's doing is taking some of that, and they were based, funny enough, in the south of England as well. He's taking some of the German stuff, he's taking some of the stuff he's seen in America, and he's taking the opportunity to be in the south of England with his own brigade and kind of bringing it all together. So he's sometimes known as the father of British light infantry. I would say he's more of kind of like the cook that brings all the ingredients together.
But it brings them together, he does. And jumping ahead, in 1805, he's promoted to lieutenant general. And then 3 years later, he's dispatched to Spain and Portugal to fight Napoleon. But I'd like to give us some context on why he's sent and why Wellington is sent home. Do you want to talk about that first?
Yes. So if we jump ahead to then, he's now Sir John Moore. Right. He's been knighted and he's been promoted. So what's happened is Wellesley's gone out there with his force, which was meant to go to South America, which is by the by. And he's had his victory at Relisa.
Yep.
Where he goes on the attack. And then he has to defend the ridge at Vimero. So after the Battle of Vimero, he's relieved. And then his commander's relieved. And all 3 of them sign the Treaty of Sintra, the Convention of Sintra. And they send the French army home, not only with their banners, not only with their weapons, but with their loot.
Right.
And to add insult to injury, they ensure the French loot is taken out of the Portuguese ports. Literally, can you imagine someone comes in and steals your family silver, and then you see them marching past you the next day with the British helping them out onto Royal Navy ships? It was a terrible, terrible convention to sign.
No.
So, I'm just trying to think of the insult to injury. If somebody walks into your house, takes your television, the next day walks past the high street and the policeman says, yes, well, he's got to stay in execution. He's going to take it home. You'd be deeply offended.
I'd be very upset. Yeah, exactly.
And so, no surprise. Wellington, Dalrymple and the commanders, they're brought home. They're kind of court of inquiry, and they're all exonerated, which is really surprising. But only Wellington, Wellesley as he was then, goes on to hold future command, and he comes back. And that's the Porto campaign, and we've covered that. But I digress. The Porto campaign, my favourite campaign. But so what happens in the intervening time is Moore sent out there, and Moore sent out there. Because he is quite popular with the army, Horse Guards. So he's got those eyes, I was saying earlier, of the right people, and he's sent to take over. Now, what's quite interesting is actually there were letters flying around saying that they didn't expect him to actually last a full year. They were probably going to relieve him before that's out. But he doesn't get much chance. He brings his officers together. And if I can, I'll just do a quick quote. He was actually really, really
Sure.
popular with his officers.
Yeah.
So one noted, quote, "In Sir John Moore's character, we have a model for everything that marks the obedient soldier, the persevering, firm and skillful general, the inflexible and the real patriot who was well sacrificed, all for personal feelings for his country's weal, the truly virtuous and honourable man, the high-minded, finished and accomplished gentleman," end quote.
Yeah, he sounds like almost with the inflexibility, he sounds like a combination of all three guys we talked about earlier, Wellington, Hill, and Crawford. Like he has that determination of Crawford, but he's also generous like Hill, but he's smart like Wellington. It sounds like he has all three attributes.
He seems to have it all really going in his favour. Yeah, I'd agree with that to quite an extent. I think he does, and he's got victories under his belt. He's got campaigns. He's not like some of the other generals who appear and disappear. You know, that have just been there through favouritism. He's got people's favour, but it seems to have come. You know, he's come up through campaigns, and has got both the administration now in building military fortifications in the south of England. He's got toughing it out in the Caribbean. He's got fighting in Corsica and America. I think it's quite a well-rounded career.
I agree. Now, unfortunately, though, he arrives just as Napoleon's bringing 200,000 men into the peninsula. I'm not sure how many men Moore had with him, but it wasn't 200,000.
It was nowhere near 200,000. No, his army was not badly sized, but it was nowhere near that position at that time.
So yeah, I think he thought. I mean, I think intelligence, like we were talking about with Waters finding out about Napoleon's moves, but I think he thought he could get a quick victory against Marshal Soult, I believe's isolated corps. Is that kind of what happened there?
Yeah, so he goes on and crosses the border. He's in Portugal at the time, and he goes against Soult, and he's effectively almost surrounded. He was going to have Soult on one side and Napoleon's corps plus on the other side. And I've mentioned it before, but Major John Waters, an exploring intelligence officer, buys some intelligence off the Spanish who'd captured some letters. He buys those letters off the Spanish, takes them to Moore, and it details, I believe, Soult's movements and plans. And he leaves there and then that day that Waters brings up to him. Otherwise, he would have been surrounded. So they start to head north.
Does he know he's going to leave back for England immediately, or does he think he's just going to set up a defensive perimeter at Corunna?
I believe he's effectively starting to go with a rear guard action, as in go back to England. He doesn't stand much chance now. He's going to have to evacuate. If he couldn't get to Portugal, he's going to have to get to Spain, off Spain, sorry. And that way he's got his back to the sea with not much chance, because Napoleon could have brought his army to bear as well. And this is where Napoleon goes back.
Yeah, no, I know Napoleon leaves the pursuit to Soult, but we talked about in the last episode, it's in the dead of winter over mountains. It's just an awful pursuit.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered this, but I've got to cover it again when you say that this is Spanish winter. So this is completely the opposite to the summer, where everyone thinks of the beaches and the drinks and the sangria. This is deep snow. This is horrible mountains. It's really mountainous in the north of Spain. It's the reason that typically everyone goes on a holiday to like the south and the west. And, this is really deep snow, very mountainous, very difficult.
Yeah.
Soldiers then carried, at least 50 kilos on their back. They got the whole world in their pack, one spare set of clothes and some food. And the equipment's not made for comfort. It's thin leather straps.
Yeah.
And they are turning hiking in woolen clothes with leather single, skin shoes on.
Yeah.
And their shoes, they're not hiking boots. They're not waterproof jackets. And their hat's a felt hat that is the most uncomfortable thing.
All right.
And they're slogging, some of them with their wives behind them. I mentioned before, some of their wives giving up birth by the side of the road, picking up the baby on one side, and almost like picking up their husband by the scruff of the neck because he's so exhausted with the other hand.
Yeah.
And they're turning away. They're fighting rearguard actions.
And one wrong step can send you sliding down a ravine and you're done. I read even Napoleon, when he was still in the pursuit, he had to lock arms with Marshal Lannes and I think Duroc just to get over the mountain.
Yeah, there's massive ravines, and I think they start to have to throw some of the pay chests down there, and and the cavalry kind of turn and do some fantastic rearguard actions like Sahagun. and that's General Paget, who becomes later Uxbridge of Waterloo fame. And we've mentioned before the light troops that kind of hold the rear guard action together under Crawford, but these are men that actually Moore would have trained up only a few years previously as well.
Right. So he epically retreats to Corunna to escape Napoleon's clutches and offers up a stiff rear guard with Black Bob Crawford, like we talked in the last episode. I have two questions for you, and you kind of mentioned it earlier. Was the Battle of Corunna a strategic withdrawal for the British, so in the sense of victory for the British, or was it a victory for the French in that they ejected the British from the peninsula?
Oh, that's a good one. The battle, I'm going to be controversial here. The battle was a British victory.
Okay.
Because what happened is they turned up to the city. I believe they're somewhere in the region of 2 Royal Navy vessels and about 50 civilian vessels, or large trading ships that were coming over to evacuate. And the troops needed a good 2 days to evacuate onto those ships. And what happens is they don't have that. These men then turn around outside the city gates and then fight outwards towards Soult, who wasn't really expecting it. He was expecting to close in and capture them and then fire on the ships if they were leaving. But this doesn't happen. It leads to some big attacks, especially famous of some Highland charges over through the streets and up and in. And I would say that the Battle of Corunna is a British victory.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, the French withdraw back and they are able to complete their objective, which is to get onto those ships.
Right.
However, the campaign itself was a withdrawing one, where obviously they lose the overall campaign by they are withdrawing strategically from Spain. Absolutely. But the Battle of Corunna is a victory in itself, both tactically and strategically, because they do achieve that aim of withdrawing. And the French fail to prevent their objectives to be met. Their French objective is not to, eject the army from Spain. It is to capture and defeat it. And neither of those things happen.
Right. It's almost like a Dunkirk moment in World War II. Yeah.
You don't win a war by evacuating, as kind of, Churchill said, but actually you can still win the wider war by coming back. And that's then what happens with the Porto campaign. And Moore achieves this. The time is bought. I think I mentioned it before, but horrible things happen. Like nearly all the horses have to be shot in the streets. It's just absolutely upsetting. Yeah. But the troops do get out, and they do have full fighting forces, which are back within. Well, they're back within 3 months. Some of them.
Well, sadly, though, what happens to our protagonist?
Well, so Moore himself is not going to be coming back. He's leading the troops outside. And he's struck in, the report is that he's struck in the left breast and shoulder by a cannon shot, which breaks his ribs, his arm, and his shoulder, his whole of his left side, and then his lungs. He's actually a bit of a kind of Nelson moment here, that he's led away, and he is told as he's dying that victory has been achieved that day.
Mm-hmm. And there's a great quote he has right here, which I love. Quote, "I always wish to die this way. I hope the people of England will be satisfied. I hope my country will do me justice," end quote. So I think he's happy to die on the battlefield. Obviously, he's the son of a doctor, so he knows if a wound is mortal or not.
Yeah, I think there's no coming back from it. It sounds like most of his left-hand side is kind of almost gone, or just pulp to the, it's awful wound. Yeah. But he manages to gather people around him and talk to them as he's dying. And he's by this point he's a bit of a soldier's soldier, and I think it gives him this reputation of dying in the moment of victory. Yeah, which is what not what he would have wanted, but what more can you achieve as a general with victory as well, rather than dying in kind of ignominy? Right.
And I know his French adversaries respected him. Marshal Soult erected a memorial to his defeated enemy. I think, is it still there today, the monument?
Yeah, there is still a monument. So it's sadly not a part of the world I've able to get to, because it is northern Spain, rather than where lots of the rest of the battlefields are kind of clumped by the Portuguese border. Yeah. But I've seen lots of images of it, and memorials are held there every year, which is really nice, and it's really well kept. So that's kind of what I like to hear from those kind of memorials. It's in It's in quite a leafy kind of almost orchard in the city, in some gardens. So it looks like a nice part. It's his tomb, memorial, and he's buried there. So he's just inside the walls, and they put him in a shroud and bury him.
Yeah. That's what we want about Marshal Soult. That was a nice gesture.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a really nice gesture. And if people look up, or I will always try to tweet with the information as well when it goes out, there's a very famous painting of his burial, and it goes with a poem. Not a drum was heard, not a funeral note, as his corpse to the rampart we hurried, not a soldier discharged his farewell shot over the grave where a hero was buried. It's moving.
It is touching and moving, and I think that's phenomenal. With all that said, he's not the most well-known general in the peninsula. Obviously, that'd be Wellington. But what do you think Sir John Moore's legacy is?
He's not one of the best known in the peninsula, but that comes with a caveat that I would actually say that for those who've dabbled in a bit of military history, people have heard of him. Sir John Moore is known. There are places in the UK, a few of them named after him. He's got a few memorials. London, Scotland, and down where I say near the Royal Military Canal, Shorncliffe Barracks used to be Sir John Moore Barracks, where it's the home of the light infantry, and over near Winchester as well. So the British Army certainly remembers him. That lines from his poem is one that's known, and the painting as well is relatively famous. And I think people have kind of got the idea that he was a famous general who died. Now, it comes with that slight caveat that his campaign to Corunna, the opening stages, was really poorly thought out. I think without doubt, if he'd got back to England, he too would have been facing a court of inquiry as to, he effectively, apart from fighting at Corunna, didn't really fight a major action, but lost his army to be evacuated, sick, tired, hungry.
Right.
So but I think difficult.
Yeah, but I think also the systemization or uniformity of his training methods, I think, were beneficial to the army at that time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that comes on as a legacy. The legacy of light infantry doctrine really puts some British troops on the map. It's one of the big advantages that I think the British Army's got in the Peninsular War, is they've got those light infantry troops. We talked about it in Crawford. And that you can draw a lineage from that training in Shorncliffe to British Army, very much modern today in the way that we fight. However, it's often said that it was Moore that did it. It was Crawford that did it. In truth, there's a whole book of men who helped that training, many of which are very junior officers and many of which were Germans. And Moore's actually the one that we hold up as kind of being the father of the light infantry, and Crawford being the one to kind of take them to war. But there's lots of other people in that mix. So I think it's kind of his legacy sometimes for the light infantry might be too generous. However, the light infantry is so important that he really does need his dues as well. So it's a difficult one when you come to a man's legacy without having met him. But he seems to be quite fondly remembered. And certainly when I was reading that quote out earlier, and that is not the only one, his men seem to have really respected him at the time.
Right. Yeah. And tragic, both him and Crawford didn't get to see the full dividends when Napoleon was finally defeated in 1815 of their training of these men for, like you said, years before.
Right, and it would have been very interesting to see what would have happened with the Peninsular War had these men, survived. Would Moore have been pushed aside for Wellesley coming back? Is a big what if. And if so, and he'd served under Wellesley, what kind of contributions would he have made to the later Peninsular War and arguably Waterloo? It would have been interesting. I certainly think Moore was very talented. It was kind of his downfall that he made a bad decision to venture into Spain when he did.
Right. Yeah, very interesting stuff about Sir John Moore. Intriguing figure and really contributed a lot to the British Army and the defeat of Napoleon, don't you think?
I do. And even though it's strange to say that he, contributed with a possible defeat of a campaign, the victory of actually bringing that many men back to Britain, many of whom then went on to either go and serve in other subsequent campaigns, certainly was a legacy that he hopefully would have been proud of. And it sounds like he was, as he was kind of as he was dying, he realised what he'd actually managed to achieve. So yeah, it's an interesting character, Sir John Moore, and he achieved a lot, and died relatively young.
Indeed. Well, thank you for that, Marcus. I appreciate your time as always. To my listeners, please check out dukeofwellington.org to learn more about Marcus and his upcoming activities. And thank you, my friend, for being on the show again.
Thank you. As always, I'm really honoured to be here and enjoy talking to you.
Thank you.